Good morning, welcome back. I hope this is the phoenix of this channel. The last video I put up on March 6th, I said I was done. No more, nada, well, maybe. Goodbye for now. I spent a lot of time looking at other channels and trying to understand what they were doing and why they had no problems getting around the copyright infringement, showing the movie clips that they had. The fact that I'm here is testament that I figured it out. What I hope the future will be are reviews of some great old movies and how they pertain to today's political and social environments. I believe these old movies, many of my favorites, have an important place in our vocabulary. I'm passionate about this. Many of you, both young and old, may have never even seen these flicks. I hope to do two things: get you interested enough to watch the entire movie, and for me to create conversation with my interpretation of the events and how they relate to today. I will be talking about these movies, and there may be times I may go off on a tangent. Sometimes they may be stories that are inspired by a scene, or just a memory of my life when I first saw these movies. Today I'm talking about two movies. I will be looking at two from similar but very different videos. They both deal with anti-Semitic themes. The two movies are The Life of Emile Zola, starring Paul Muni, and Gentleman's Agreement, starring Gregory Peck. Both movies won Best Picture. Both stars were nominated for Best Actor, and they both lost. The movie did win Best Supporting Actor in each. One movie deals with anti-Semitism with a tissue, the other with a hammer. And since I'm dealing with themes, I don't think the endings are important, but I'll still try not to give away the endings. I will say this about endings of both movies, and neither movie does the ship sink. As I said, Zola was made in 1937 and was made before the war, and Gentleman's Agreement after. Both protagonists are writers, and neither is a Jew.
Too bad.
The first part is a typical biographical movie. It would be unfair not to put some of this in context. In his early years, he was a close friend to Paul Cézanne. Paul Cézanne was considered the father of modern art. In this clip, he and Cézanne are in a restaurant in Pigalle, a notorious area in Paris known for its open prostitution, even today. Here's where he meets and writes about the life of a prostitute he calls Nana. This was his first bestseller, and put Zola on the map, so to speak. The clip does bring back a few memories for me. The loading of the women in the paddy wagon was also a scene from Irma la Douce. The clip where Nana laments her past brought back a scene from Arthur.
Not bad now. If you look quick and there's not too much light.
Have you ever seen her face when the light catches it just right? She's really quite beautiful. Of course, you can't depend on that light.
Now, here I'm going to go on a tangent. In 1964, I was in the service and we just finished practice landings in Spain. Our ship pulled into Le Havre, France for 5 days. For $50, you could sign up for a tour to Paris for 2 of those days. Long story short, our first night we went to Pigalle just like everybody else on the tour. Remember, we've been on ship for close to 2 months. I had in my pocket 20 francs. $5. So I met this girl who says she's the only American working in Pigalle. We talked for quite a few hours, and it was very interesting. She invited me back to her place. I said I only had a few francs, and she said, it's for free. It must have been very interesting. But I was newly married, so straight arrow as I am, I said no thank you. In this clip, we see the French army off to fight Germany, and it does not go well. Go figure. Zola writes another bestseller called The Downfall.
Never did I think I'd live to see France groveling in the dust under the Prussian heel.
France is in total disarray. The fear that Germany could march into Paris was going to be too much to swallow and very possible. This is where he attacks the general staff of the army, and Zola is put on notice. In this clip, it appears that the French general staff is riddled with spies. One of them gives information to the Germans, and it gets back to the general staff. Here, we see them playing the game of telephone. The French general staff is running amok with the news that they have a spy running in their midst. Finally, pass from one general to another general until it gets to the Minister of War. I've told you all this to lead up to this point. Here is the only outright indication of anti-Semitism in this entire movie. I could have started right here, but I wanted you to understand how important Zola was as a writer. Now I'm going to stop here for a second so you can see what I'm talking about.
Not this fella here, Dreyfus, Albert. I wonder how he ever became a member of the General Staff.
Here, I'm going to give you some history now. In 1937, I guess this would be another tangent, Hitler had already come to power, and Warner Brothers, owned by Jews, had a large market share of the movie business in Germany and did not want to insult and lose that market. They had to show this much to keep the movie in some context. I'll have more to say on this in a bit. They get a sample of Dreyfus's writing and arrest him for treason.
I don't understand, Commandant. I only...
Repeat the last word. In the name of the law, you're under arrest.
His wife says she will protest, and she is warned by the general staff it would only make it worse.
I'll call...
You will call no one, madame.
And he is convicted.
Guilty! Dreyfus found guilty!
Now let me put this clip in to show you the similarity to then and today. In this clip, here's Dreyfus being stripped of all his markings of his services in public. This scene was used by an old TV show from 1966, called Brandon. Looks very familiar, doesn't it? In this clip, the proof of his innocence is presented to the general staff, but they don't want to hear it.
About Dreyfus, an innocent man rotting on Devil's Island.
Dreyfus. Will we never hear the last of the man?
They pack off this colonel and send him to North Africa.
Can't we find a new post for our friend Picard? It's very quiet here in Paris.
Now, Dreyfus's wife and brother, who was never mentioned in the movie, appealed to Zola to pick up their cause. Anti-Semitism in France is running in a fever pitch. Our newspapers openly anti-Semitic. After some investigation, Zola does pick up Dreyfus's cause and writes his famous letter to the President of France on the front page of the paper L'Aurore. It was a literary, liberal, and socialist newspaper published in Paris. Its most famous headline was Émile Zola's J'accuse, means I accuse. You may hear this dialogue in modern movies with that line, J'accuse. I read the English translation, and first it's considerably longer than the movie version. Also, the most important part I thought that dealt with anti-Semitism was totally left out. I was intrigued by one paragraph. It is a crime to poison the small and the humble, to extirpate the passions of reaction and intolerance by sheltering behind the odious anti-Semitism of which the great liberal France of human rights will die if she's not cured of it. Is that not the policy of the new Republican Party? Zola is put on trial for his libel against the general staff, where Paul Muni shines. Here is where I'm going to stop. Does Dreyfus spend the rest of his natural life on Devil's Island? Is Zola found guilty? And if he is, what price does he pay? All this can be seen in the movie, and you can watch it right here on YouTube for just $3.99, or check it out from your local library. If you have TCM, keep an eye, it will show up. You just watched The Life of Amy Zola, where I talked about what a great movie it is. It dealt with anti-Semitism with a tissue. It just had a brief mention of Judaism in just one scene, all out of fear of disturbing the German marketplace. The real story is based on the real fight against anti-Semitism. The next movie I'll be talking about is Gentleman's Agreement. It stars Gregory Peck, Dorothy Malone, and Celeste Holmes, who won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, and John Garfield, who is the only Jew in the movie. This movie talks about anti-Semitism with a hammer. So sit back and get ready for an education. Here, Gregory Peck tries to explain what a Jew is to his son, played by Dean Stockwell. You might remember him from Quantum Leap. His definition is a bit basic, and there are a lot of Jews who just don't go to synagogue.
Anyway, I mean exactly.
Well, you remember last week when you asked me about that big church?
Sure.
I told you there were lots of different churches?
Yeah.
Well, the people who go to that particular church are called Catholics, see? Then there are people who go to other churches and they're called Protestants. Then there are others who go to still different ones and they're called Jews. Only they call their kind of churches synagogues or temples.
In this scene, Peck is introduced to Lacey, played by Dorothy McGuire. She tells Peck it was her idea to do the
Back around
story of
Christmas last year,
anti-Semitism.
that Jewish school teacher resigning. I was the one who...
Why, sure, I knew somebody with...
Peck is reluctant to do the story because he just can't seem to find the right angle.
You mean there's enough anti-Semitism in real life without people reading it?
No. But this one's doomed before I start.
Peck feels that there is nothing more he can say about anti-Semitism that hasn't already been said. Well, he's in for it. Wait a minute. I'm not going to tell you what happens. Keep watching. Still looking for an angle to write a story. He has a close friend, Dave Golden, played by John Garfield. Maybe he could tap in the way he feels and give him some insight into what it's like to be a Jew.
What must a Jew feel about this thing? Dave. Can I think my way into Dave's mind? He's the kind of fellow I'd be if I were a Jew, isn't he? We grew up together. We lived in the same kind of homes. We were a gang. We did everything together.
Here, Peck finds out that his secretary is really Jewish. She changed her name to get the job. As hard as it may be to believe, it still happens today. Hard to prove you weren't hired because you were Jewish.
Wilofsky. Estelle Wilofsky. And I just couldn't take it. About applications, I mean. So, one day I wrote the same firm 2 letters. Same as you're doing now. I sent the Elaine Wales one after they'd said there were no openings to my first one. I got the job, all right. Do you know what firm that was? Smith's Weekly.
I put this in for fun. This is their first date, and it's their first kiss.
Kathy.
Hallmark has nothing on this couple. Nothing.
Marriage can be such a good way to live, Kathy. All these years I've kept hoping.
I've kept hoping too.
In this scene, Peck finds out that the hotel where they are going to spend their honeymoon is restricted. And he's a bit upset.
Be a time. Sure, but there must be a time once when you fight back, Dave. I want to make them look me in the eye.
And I have a tangent here for you. There was a time many years ago when major hotels in Miami were all restricted. There were signs in the lobby that read, "No Irish or Jews allowed." The way it was ended was a group of Jews brought one of the hotels, lowered the price, and forced the other hotels to sell until they all allowed Jews in. Now, this is probably the most famous scene in the movie. When you see highlights of this movie on some other shows, this is the scene they show the most.
And you do restrict your guests.
Notice the bellman.
Well, I wouldn't say that, Mr. Green. But in any event, there seems to be some mistake because we don't have a free room in the entire hotel. But if you'd like, perhaps I can fix you up at the Brewster Hotel down near the station.
I'm not staying at the Brewster. Look, I'm Jewish, and you don't take Jews. That's it, isn't it?
I never said that.
If you don't accept Jews, say so.
Don't raise your voice to me, Mr. Green. You speak a little more quietly, please.
Do you or don't you?
Mr. Green, I'm a very busy man. Now, if you want me to phone for a cab or room at the Brewster, I'll do so. Otherwise...
Otherwise what?
This is almost a fight scene when Dave is confronted by a drunken patron at the club and is called a yid. Just another example of what is just under the surface of many people. The alcohol could let it go. As one of our former presidents said, there's good people on both sides. Zoll said it could happen in France. Is it happening here?
Dave Goldman, what's yours?
Don't mind what my name is. I told you I don't like officers. I especially don't like them if they're yids.
Yeah, the original article was supposed to be what it's like to live like a Jew for 6 months. He lasted a week. In this scene, Peck wraps up what it's like to be Jewish.
No, it's just that I've come to see that lots of nice people who aren't. People who despise it and detest it and deplore it and protest their own innocence. Help it along and then wonder why it grows. People who'd never beat up a Jew or your calculated child. People who think that anti-Semitism is something away off in some dark crackpot place with low-class morons. That's the biggest discovery I've made about this whole business, kid. The good people, the nice people.
This scene, Dorothy McGuire says how happy she is not to be Jewish and gives an impassioned speech on all the benefits in not being Jewish.
You could never understand that it's a fact, like being glad you're good looking instead of ugly, rich instead of poor, young instead of old, healthy instead of sick. You could never understand that. It's just a practical fact, not a judgment that I'm superior. I could never make you see that. You twist it into something horrible, a conniving and aiding and abetting a thing that I loathe as much as you do. It's better to finish it now. Not that it would make any difference to me, but you said, I'm going to let everybody know as if you hadn't before and would now. So I just wondered. Not that it would matter to me one way or the other.
Really? It won't matter to me, as she says? I'm going to go on a tangent here. True story. Many years ago, I dated a woman, not Jewish, and on one of our first dates, she asked me to accompany her to go buy a Christmas tree. Now, as a kid, we had a tree every year. Nothing religious about it. It was the excuse my father needed to put the trains up. So I went with her. She picked out a tree and had a tag that said $45. This is a long time ago. So I said to the guy, $45 for a dead tree seems like a lot of money. He says, it's not a dead tree, it's a live tree. I said, once you cut it, it's a dead tree. So he reduced the price by $5. 5 years later, when we broke up, the last thing she said to me as she was leaving, I'll never forgive you for negotiating on that Christmas tree. True story.
You were in public relations, weren't you?
What makes you say that?
I don't know. You just seem like a clever sort of a guy.
What makes you think I wasn't a GI?
Huh? Now, for goodness sake, Green, don't get me wrong. Why, some of my best friends...
I know, dear, and some of your other best friends are Methodists, but you never...
In this scene, we get to hear my favorite anti-Semitic remark. However, I've heard this one a lot, especially at the workplace. It's not that they don't like Jews outwardly, but it's been shown in Germany when they would turn on their friends just for being Jewish. Or here, where it's chanted, Jews will not replace us. It's surprisingly how fast people say they are not anti-Semitic jump on the bandwagon of hate. Dave tells him he has experienced all the things that a Jew experiences, and he can go back to being a Christian.
Tommy got called dirty Jew and kite messing kids down the street. Came home pretty bad as shit.
Now you know it all. That's the place they really get at you. Kids. Now you even know that. Well, you can quit being Jewish now. There's nothing else.
This is the answer. Are you prepared to stand up? Are you a good person? Or are you what's helping the increase in anti-Semitism in this country?
The Cathys everywhere are afraid of getting the gate from their little groups of nice people. They make little clucking sounds of disapproval, but they want you and Uncle John to stand up and yell and take sides and fight. But do they fight? No. Kathy and Harry and Jane and all of them. They scold Bilbo twice a year and think they fought the good fight for democracy in this country. They haven't got the guts to take the step from talking to action.
In this clip, Peck's mother reads the part of the article that he wrote, a challenge for today's America.
Driving away from the inn, I knew all about every man or woman who'd been told the job was filled, and it wasn't. Every youngster who'd ever been turned down by a college or a summer camp. I knew the rage that pitches through you when you see your own child shaken and dazed. From that moment, I saw an unending attack by adults on kids of 7 and 8, 10 and 12.
Stir it up more. That's why. Let it alone. We'll handle it our own way. The hush-hush way? Oh, I don't care what you call it. Let it alone. You can't write it out of existence. We've been fighting it for years, and we know from experience the less talk there is about it, the better.
Sure.
A wealthy Jewish industrialist is preaching a long-held theory that anti-Semitism can be just wished away. Well, it can't be. Even with all the evidence from the camps, and just again, this past October 7th, we all have to speak up. We have to end the silence. It starts with each of us. Well, that's our show for today. I'm not going to put this on the schedule because it takes a lot longer than I thought to get around the problems with YouTube. But there will be another one. It will be Harvey. As you can see, I'm not doing the comedian. It's just way too much work to try to get past all the copyright infringements and with the movies, and then a couple of that on top of the comedians. Maybe in a whole separate section later on down the road, I'll do just the comedians. I hope you enjoyed today's show. We'll see you next time. And as Mr. Spock says, who, by the way, is Jewish.
Live long and prosper.